She did it just loud enough that the table next to us turned. "We're done," she said, with a dramatic lift of her wine glass. Her eyes sparkled. Her friends clutched their phones, already recording, already grinning. Then came the kicker. "Just kidding," they roared. Open-mouthed laughter, shrieks, clinking glasses. The kind of laughter people use to cover something else. I didn't laugh. I looked at her, the tilt of her head, the way she glanced sideways for approval. She was playing to the room, not to me, not to our history, not to the man who had sat across from her for 8 years of holidays, funerals, surgeries, career collapses, and red-eye flights. I wasn't a person in that moment. I was a punchline she could recycle in group chats. So I folded my napkin. Deliberately, I placed it beside the bread plate, took my card from the little leather folio, and slid a $100 bill underneath. Enough to cover my steak, her sea base, the shared bottle of Merlot, and tip. I stood. No dramatic gestures. No flipped chairs. Just a quiet exit. She blinked. "Wait, honey, come on." It was a joke. I didn't even look back. Just walked. Past the bar. Past the maitre d', who gave me that slight, knowing nod that only older men who've lived through enough recognize. Outside, the air was cooler than I remembered. It was one of those early spring nights where the wind carried memory. I could still hear their laughter as the door swung shut behind me. Not even the good kind. The fake, drunken kind, meant to sting, meant to wound. They hadn't even noticed that I hadn't smiled all evening. I didn't drive home. I didn't call a cab. I walked, past shuttered boutiques and glowing 24-hour diners. I walked until my legs ached, until the pinched heat behind my eyes had burned off. At a corner, I saw my reflection in a shop window. There I was, 57, former military, former engineer, still paying the bills, still fixing leaks, still showing up. I stared at myself and muttered, "We're done." But I wasn't kidding. When I got back to the condo, she was already texting. "You're being dramatic." It was just a joke. Seriously? I didn't respond. I packed a single duffel. The essentials. The stuff that couldn't be replaced. My father's watch. A manila envelope with my discharge papers and financial documents. A photo of my daughter from my first marriage. I left the key on the counter. No note. No speech. Just the key. Then I wiped the fingerprint reader, logged into the joint bank accounts, and transferred my share out. Not out of spite. Out of practicality. We had no prenup, no legal binding. Just a shared life that, apparently, could be undone with a smirk over oysters and Chardonnay. Then I deleted our shared calendar, my side of our photos, every digital breadcrumb of our life together. I locked my phone in airplane mode and dropped it into a drawer at a friend's apartment across town. By sunrise, I no longer existed. Not to her. Not to her friends. Not to the world she built around selfies and shallow brunches and performative affection. And when she rolled over at 6:42 a.m., undoubtedly expecting an apology text or at least a confused emoji, she found nothing. Just silence. And silence, my friend, is far louder than rage. She woke up around 7:30, judging by the light. Not too early. She was never the up-at-dawn type unless it involved bottomless mimosas. The bed was warm on one side and cold on the other, which didn't register right away. She stretched, yawned, and padded into the kitchen in one of my old t-shirts, still expecting me to be there brewing coffee like clockwork. Instead, she found the counter cleared. Not wiped clean, cleared. No wallet. No car keys. No phone charger. Not even the damn coffee grinder. But the thing that made her pause, made her stomach do that little twist of premonition, was the key. The spare one. The one we kept in the little ceramic dish next to the salt and pepper mills. It was laid flat, perfectly centered, as if placed with purpose. She stared at it for a long time, then opened the fridge, out of muscle memory. No leftover pasta, no labeled Tupperware, no meal prep containers. Just her salad dressings and 2 sad bottles of rose. Her first message was a shrug. "Where'd you go, Houdini?" "Forgot your body this time." 2 laughing emojis. A wine glass. Sent at 7:58 a.m. No response. By 9 a.m., the second message hit a different tone. "Okay, seriously, this isn't funny. Call me." The call logs show 3 outgoing calls, back to back, within 2 minutes. All went to voicemail. She left none. She called my office next, only to be told, by a polite receptionist I trained myself, that I'd resigned. No 2-week notice. Just a final email with a forwarding address for HR and the words, "Effective immediately." The silence began to stretch. She opened her banking app next, which she later described to a friend like discovering a ghost had emptied a room you were still standing in. My name was gone from the joint account. My profile photo gone. Even the label joint checking had quietly reverted to her maiden name alone. The money? I didn't touch hers. I took only what was mine and made sure it looked boring, ordinary, not dramatic, not vengeful, just finished. By noon, she called two of my old college friends. One didn't answer. The other said he hadn't heard from me in months. That was a lie. We'd had beers 3 nights ago, after I showed him the video of her little joke. He didn't laugh either. By 2 p.m., she was pacing in the condo, calling her friends and trying to tell the story like it still had a punchline. No, he just left. Like, completely gone. Not even a note. Who does that? Her laugh was brittle, forced. Her voice broke on the second gone. By evening, she started texting my daughter, which was a mistake. They never had much of a bond. Too many passive-aggressive digs about, "You're real, mom," and "We're not a blended family. We're just figuring it out." Still, she tried. "Hey, have you heard from your dad? Can you just tell him I'm worried?" The reply came 4 hours later. A single line. "He said to tell you the punchline landed." That's when she started crying. Not because she missed me. Not yet. No, that came later. She cried because the man she used to lean on, financially, emotionally, socially, had disappeared with such precision it scared her. Not messy, not vengeful, just surgical, clinical. She tried to call again. This time, it didn't even ring. Straight to voicemail. And for the first time since that night in the restaurant, she realized this wasn't a bluff. This wasn't a man storming out to sulk. This was a man executing a plan. And the part that gnawed at her most? She never even saw the moment he decided. By the next Sunday, she had the audacity to post a photo from brunch. Same place, same crowd, -1. My empty chair wasn't cropped. It was still there, an unspoken shape in the frame. The caption read, "Brunch cures all 2 hearts bottle with popping cork, #girltribe, #no drama just champagne." But everything in the photo screamed the opposite. A week earlier, that table would have been packed. Now it looked uneven. 2 of the usual women were absent. One was tagged, but never reshared the post. And the best friend, ally, the one who'd squealed, "Do it. Say it like you mean it," while recording my public humiliation, she looked off, face pale, eyes hollow, like the smile didn't quite reach. They sat sipping mimosas, but no one toasted. No one laughed quite as loud. No one said it, but they were watching her differently now, like an animal that had bitten the hand that fed it. The first crack was subtle. A PR girl named Kara canceled their upcoming collaboration, citing timing conflicts. Except Kara had no problem posting poolside shots from her actual brunch, somewhere else, with someone else. Then came the real hit. Alira, the boutique brand that used to send her free handbags every quarter, quietly ended their ambassador partnership. No statement. Just no new tags, no DMs, no comment replies. She emailed them. Twice. They never responded. She told Ally it must have been a misunderstanding. It's probably algorithm stuff. You know how these brands ghost sometimes. But Ally didn't reply to that either. See, here's the thing. Status among women like her isn't built on money alone. It's an ecosystem. Social currency. Quiet alliances. The kind of invisible scaffolding you only notice when it starts coming apart. And I had been holding more of it than she realized. A quiet recommendation here. A favor called in there. The restaurant comped their tab because the owner owed me a design review. The local photographer who used to shoot their girl power content, I covered her website hosting, for free, for 3 years. She tried to book a table at a new launch party. Fully booked, sorry. She messaged a stylist for an event, already committed to another client. Even the wine bar she used to name drop me had changed reservation systems and couldn't find her loyalty account. Her text to Ally 2 nights later was short. "Did you hear from him?" A full hour passed. Then a reply. "No." What? She didn't answer. Because that was the moment the thought crept in. Maybe this wasn't a coincidence. Maybe I hadn't just left. Maybe I was pulling out thread by thread, the quiet supports of a world she thought she had built. The women around her weren't cruel. They didn't confront her. They didn't post subtweets or whisper rumors. They just disengaged. Slowly, like someone had issued a silent signal. The next brunch had only 3 people, and none of them ordered champagne. The week after that, she didn't post a photo. And for the first time since that dinner, she caught herself checking the mirror a little too long. Not for makeup, for cracks. At first, it was curiosity. Then it turned to anxiety. Then obsession. She started late one night, glass of wine in hand, swiping through her camera roll like some forensic archivist. Not for nostalgia. She never did nostalgia. She was looking for clues. Proof he was still somewhere. A restaurant receipt in the background. a badge on his coat, a tag on a duffel bag in a vacation photo she'd never posted. By midnight, she was on Instagram, typing his full name. Nothing. Not even the burner account he used to follow local car meetups. Gone. Facebook? Deactivated. LinkedIn? Profile doesn't exist. She even searched Reddit, scrolling through subs he used to mention in passing. Nothing. No comments. No usernames that felt familiar. He'd always been a digital minimalist, but now it was like he'd scrubbed himself clean. Like someone hiding from a predator. And she was the predator. She texted Ally again. Do you think he changed his number? The dots appeared, then vanished. No reply. At 3 a.m., she was on Pinterest of all places, searching for his old usernames. He used to save woodworking ideas, minimal cabin designs. All gone. She started messaging people. A friend from his old job. A former neighbor. The bartender at the Irish pub he used to haunt twice a month. Most didn't respond. The ones who did had the same answer. Haven't seen him in a while. Thought you guys were still together. By Friday, she called his cousin, Jason. They weren't close. She'd made fun of him once for driving a manual Honda Civic, said it reeked of 2008. Still, she asked, has he been in touch? Jason hesitated. Why? She forced a light tone. He left. I just want to make sure he's okay. Jason gave a long sigh. He's fine. Better than I've seen him in years. Her stomach flipped. So you have seen him? A pause. He didn't want me to say anything. But yeah, briefly. At a conference. Out of state. What name was he using, she asked. Jason's voice dropped. You didn't hear this from me. But middle name. Different last. He said he was consulting now. Low profile. Then he hung up. She called back. Straight to voicemail. Middle name. Different last. That hit harder than she expected. Like a final erasure. She was the only one still using his real name. The one she'd mocked for being too formal in group settings. She opened a fresh tab. Searched Daniel Thomas. Then D.T. Weston. Then a string of name combinations. Nothing concrete. Except a blurry photo on a state conference website. Sustainability Expo, guest panelists. A man in a dark suit, back turned to the camera, talking to a state senator. She zoomed in. It looked like him. Older. More angular. Confident. Not the man who used to carry her bags while she posed for selfies. She reverse image searched it. No hits. She clicked the name beneath it. Thomas D. Westman. New name. New life. She cross-referenced it with property registries. LLC filings. Bankruptcies. Public board minutes. Nothing matched. No mistakes. No sloppiness. It was like he'd planned this escape in advance. And she started to realize, maybe he had. Every time she'd mocked him for printing hard copies of financial documents. Every time she told him his neat folders were boomer energy. Every password he wrote down instead of saving in a browser. It wasn't habit. It was insulation. He wasn't just gone. He was untraceable. And the more she tried to chase his shadow, the more she saw her own reflection in the dark. Alone. Outplayed. By the man she thought would always be standing behind her, waiting to forgive her next laugh. While she sat with her fingers scrolling through dead-end search results and social media voids, he was sipping his coffee in a different city, in a different shirt, with a different spine. Not straighter, lighter. He didn't vanish to escape. He vanished to build. The first thing he did was shave the beard. The one she used to say made him look like a retired lumberjack, but not in a hot way. He ran a razor down to bare skin, looked in the mirror, and saw someone new. Not younger, not older, just forward. He bought 3 tailored shirts, none of them plaid. 2 pairs of shoes, burnished leather. Then a coat, not warm and practical, sharp and dark and deliberate. His first purchase under his full legal name, Daniel Thomas Weston, was 15% of a logistics software company he'd advised 2 years ago. He knew their books, knew their burn rate, knew they were undervalued. Quiet capital, direct transfer. No board seat, just leverage. His second investment was less conventional. A supply chain firm that specialized in last-mile routing for small-scale vendors, specifically in industries she never bothered to learn existed. The paperwork ran through a trust name she'd never seen, registered in a state she'd never visited. The lawyer who handled it was a friend of his from years back. The kind of friend she once described as dry toast in boat shoes. That dry toast just created the legal firewall that ensured she would never legally touch a cent again. In his apartment, rented monthly, clean, sparse, sat a modest desk. No clutter, no knickknacks, just 3 objects, a fountain pen, a black notebook, and a small folded photo. It was her laughing, pre-brunch, taken on his old phone. He kept it not because he missed her, Not because he longed for what was lost. He kept it the way soldiers keep bullet casings, as a memory of what tried to kill them and failed. Sometimes, when the days felt too calm, too free, he'd open the photo just to feel the sting again. Not the pain, but the precision. Every word from that restaurant still echoed in his mind. We're done. Laughter. Just kidding. But it wasn't a joke anymore. It had become doctrine. He didn't talk about her. Not to the news circles. Not to the advisors, the investors, the quiet operators who started asking him for input. They only knew him as the man who seemed to have no past, just relentless focus. He started running again. Half marathons. Bought a bike. Read nonfiction. Slept 7 hours. Woke up early not because someone needed him, but because he wanted to. He left no digital trail because there was no need. He didn't crave being seen. The anonymity was the point. And every deal he signed, every dollar he positioned, every meeting where someone mistook him for a man who'd always had it together, those weren't just wins. They were bricks. He wasn't building revenge. He was building a life that could not be joked away. And in the back of his drawer, along with that folded photo, was something else. A page he'd torn from her favorite fashion magazine. One she used to read while pretending not to look at his phone. On it, a quote she'd once underlined. Power isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the room no one sees you enter. He smiled at that every time he opened the drawer. Because now he was the room. And she couldn't even find the door. It started with a photo, one that wasn't even supposed to matter. A background shot in an Instagram story, blurry and angled. Just a quick pan of a charity gala's reception line. The kind of event where people pose next to overpriced centerpieces and pretend to care about regional infrastructure development while eyeing whose dress came straight off a showroom rack. But there he was, just behind a city councilwoman, in a charcoal suit. No tie. Pocket square, deep navy. Hair combed back, shorter than she remembered. Shoulders squared like he had nothing left to explain. The shot only lasted a second. But someone paused it, cropped it, shared it. Is this Daniel? 3 group chats lit up. One sent it to Ally. Ally didn't reply immediately. Instead, she called her. No pleasantries. No, hey babe. Just, did you see it? She had. The moment the image hit her phone, she went still. Not the kind of stillness from being caught, but something stranger, like her body had stopped buffering. Her thumb hovered, not scrolling, not saving, just stuck. Because the man in that frame didn't look wounded, or petty, or lost. He looked absent from everything she'd once been, from her orbit, from her narrative. The way he stood said it all. Not smug, not vindictive, but like a man who didn't need to be noticed to be relevant. She zoomed in. Twice. The lapel pin was unfamiliar, some state-level board, she guessed. The woman beside him was in her 60s, respected, well-connected. He wasn't clinging to her. They were equals in that space. Did you send that to me to mess with me? She asked quietly into the phone. No, Ally said. And then, after a pause, I didn't know he'd be there. She bit her lip. But you knew he'd resurface, didn't you? Another silence. Not like that, Ally said. She walked into her kitchen, stared at the half-empty wine bottle. She hadn't cooked in 3 days. Her fridge was mostly sauces and old takeout. It occurred to her, he was the one who grocery shopped. He was the one who remembered to refill prescriptions, buy batteries, fix the busted cabinet hinge. And he was the one who knew how to quietly walk away from a sinking ship while she was still dancing on the deck. She pulled up his old texts. Still there, though marked as no longer in service. She scrolled through one from a year ago. Don't forget to hydrate during the conference. He used to say things like that. Quiet, responsible, invisible love. The kind that doesn't win applause, but keeps people alive. Ally broke the silence again. He looked good, she said, tone unreadable. She hated that Ally had noticed. Hated more that she wasn't wrong. Yeah, she admitted. He did. Their silence dragged out. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she could feel it forming. A new anxiety, one she couldn't name yet. Because if he'd resurfaced once, that meant he chose to. That meant everything that came next would be deliberate. And that meant one terrifying thing. He wasn't just living without her. He was moving strategically, and no one knew what the next move would be. It was a Thursday night dinner at Belle LaCroix, the kind of place with moody lighting, expensive plates made to look artisanal, and waiters who wore aprons like surgical gowns. It was Ally's idea. Let's do a palate reset, she'd said. Meaning, let's pretend everything's fine. Let's surround ourselves with glasses and gossip and roasted beet salad until we forget the photo that still haunts our group chat. She wore her best dress, the one she saved for events she wanted to be photographed at. She curled her hair, just so, redid her nails that afternoon. Fake control, applied in layers. She was in the middle of a story, something ridiculous about a new Pilates instructor who said, "Inhale confidence," while touching her lower back, when the server appeared. A young guy, polite, forgettable. He didn't say a word, just placed a small cream envelope directly in front of her. No card, no note, just her name, handwritten in block letters. The table hushed. Someone laughed awkwardly. Is this like secret admirer stuff? But she wasn't laughing. Her gut twisted. This wasn't cute. It wasn't flirty. It felt engineered. She slid a manicured nail under the flap and peeled it open with slow, deliberate tension. Inside were 3 sheets of paper, a receipt, and a folded note. The first page was a notarized declaration from the manager of a downtown hotel. Specific dates, specific names, room service requests, 2 entrees, wine, extra towels. One of the nights listed was the same weekend she told him she was spending the night at Allies after too much wine. Her eyes darted across the second page, a signed statement from the concierge, affirming a spa appointment and a note about a car service arranged for Ms. A. She didn't finish reading it. The third sheet was worse. An image, color printout, time-stamped. Security footage, blurry but unmistakable. 2 figures kissing at the valet pickup. Her and. She didn't want to look across the table, but she did. Ally. There was a long second before the note slipped from between her fingers. It fluttered down and landed just under her plate. She bent down and retrieved it with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. It was her best friend's handwriting. She recognized the loops, the little pretentious curls at the end of each Y. It read, "I didn't know he'd find out. I swear. I didn't know he kept records." Her fork clattered to the table like a dropped hammer. The sharp noise cut through the restaurant's ambient chatter. Her smile, rigid, performative, collapsed completely. Lips parted, breath hitching in her throat. The women around her weren't sure whether to speak. One reached for a glass of water. Another just stared, too polite to ask, too interested to look away. She lifted her head and met Ally's eyes. Ally had gone sheet white, hands clenched in her lap, mouth moving, no words forming. She knew, not just about the kiss, not just about the betrayal. She knew he was behind this, that this wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just an exposed secret. It was a message, carefully timed, carefully placed, and it didn't come with screaming or accusations or tears. Just paper. Paper that folded her entire facade in half, right there on a dinner table covered in $36 appetizers. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She whispered, "You." It wasn't even said with anger, just a crack, low and fractured, a sound that barely made it across the table. And yet somehow, everyone heard it. Glasses stopped midair. A knife hovered above duck confit. Someone's phone buzzed, unanswered. Ally didn't respond at first. She blinked slowly, lips parted, as if trying to convince herself that it hadn't been aimed at her. That maybe she misheard. That maybe, somehow, this wasn't about the valet photo, or the note in her own handwriting, or the spa appointment she never thought would be traced. Ally began, then stopped, choking on nothing. I didn't think he'd. But she didn't finish. She stood, stumbled against her chair, and walked straight out of the restaurant. Not a word. Not a purse grab. Not a goodbye. Just a fleeing animal's instinct. Get away before it gets worse. The other women stayed frozen. Not out of loyalty to either of them, but fear. Fear of being next. Fear of whatever silent force had just detonated the social hierarchy they'd all been leaning on like scaffolding. She was still holding the pages. Her hand had locked into a claw. Her breath was ragged. The envelope was torn, but still there. A server came to refill her water and paused, instinctively sensing he was too close to something raw, something surgical. He placed the carafe down gently and backed away without a word. She looked at the note again. The scrawl. I didn't know he kept records. Records. Not photos. Not memories. Records. This wasn't spontaneous revenge. This was an operation. She reached for her phone, fingers trembling, and opened her calendar. Scrolled back to the weekend of the hotel receipt. The dates matched. She told him she was with Ally. Spa day. Sleepover. We're doing face masks and wine. Babe, I'll be dead to the world. And he never argued. Just said cool. Lock the door. Lock the door. She remembered the way he said it. Calm. Dull even. Like an afterthought. But now, sitting in the dim lighting of that restaurant, it sounded different. He'd already known. Maybe not everything, but enough. He'd already started planning. The betrayal was an event for her. But for him, it was a starting point. And the worst part wasn't the envelope or the papers. or even Ally's disappearing act. It was knowing he didn't need to show up. He didn't need to confront her. He didn't want her to scream, or beg, or defend. He just wanted her to know, to sit in it, to realize that the world she thought she owned, the friends, the invitations, the harmless lies, had become a chessboard. And she'd just learned he wasn't a pawn. He was the one who flipped the board. One of the women finally leaned in. What the hell was that? But she didn't answer. She couldn't. She just sat there, jaw clenched, gripping a page covered in dates and signatures. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't the one making the room go quiet. She was the one left in the silence. She slammed the door behind her hard enough to rattle the picture frames. Her heels clacked across the hardwood like gunshots. Wine bottle. Stemware. She didn't even bother with the lights. The papers were still clutched in her hand, creased and sweaty, like evidence from a crime she didn't commit. Except she did. Or at least, he made damn sure she couldn't pretend otherwise anymore. She dropped the envelope on the kitchen counter and pulled it apart, splaying the contents like cards in a doomed poker hand. Her breath was short, shallow, hot. The notarized statements, the photo, the note from Ally. All of it laid out before her like a trap she'd walked into smiling. But there was one last document she hadn't bothered reading. Something thicker, heavier. She peeled it from the back of the envelope. The paper had weight, government issue texture. She knew the look, property transfer paperwork. The kind you sign in a notary's office under artificial light, while a man in a too-tight tie clicks a stamp and slides it back with a smile. She didn't understand at first. Her name wasn't on it. Ally's was. Address of property being transferred. She read the street. Blinked. Read it again. It was Ally's apartment. The one with the walk-up loft in the trendy side of town. The one Ally had just moved into last year after her relationship with her ex imploded. The building. The unit. The deed. Daniel T. Weston, listed as the new legal owner. Not a rental. Not a lease takeover. A purchase. She dropped the document on the counter like it burned. Her phone rang. Ally. She stared at the name, but didn't pick up. Couldn't. Wouldn't. Instead, she flipped the final page, where the ink was still fresh enough to gleam under the kitchen light. There, scrawled in his familiar, neat block letters, always uppercase, like he never trusted cursive, were 11 words. Disposable. That's how you both saw me. Now see what that feels like. She sat down slowly, knees buckling, the way they did when you realize gravity applies to your life now. He hadn't screamed, hadn't torched her wardrobe or posted screenshots or sent group texts laced with venom. He'd just bought her best friend's home out from under her. A silent purchase. A silent eviction. A message written not in blood, but in deeds. She imagined Ally arriving home, unlocking the door, only to find a formal notice taped to the inside. Please vacate the property within 30 days. Ownership transfer effective immediately. No confrontation. No warning. Just cold, silent, surgical power. She stared at the document again, hoping, irrationally, that it would change. That some clause would void it. That maybe it was a forgery. But he wasn't the type to fake anything. That was her specialty. What he did was real. Legal. Binding. A man who, for 8 years, paid bills, fixed hinges, remembered birthdays. Not because she asked, but because he noticed. The same man she'd turned into a dinner party punchline. He'd said nothing. And yet, here he was, speaking louder than anyone she'd ever met. She closed the envelope and sat there for a long time. Not thinking. Not even blinking. Just sitting in the wreckage of her own arrogance. He hadn't ruined her. She just finally realized what it felt like to lose something she didn't think was capable of leaving. It was a gallery opening in the Arts District. One of those pop-up spaces where people pretend to understand abstract sculpture while quietly judging each other's shoes. She hadn't planned to be there. Truthfully, she was there out of sheer desperation. Her last friend in that circle had stopped answering texts, and this was her attempt at reappearing, re-establishing, reclaiming whatever clout hadn't yet slipped through her fingers. She barely made it through the entrance before she saw him. Daniel, hair slightly longer than the last photo. Black coat, confident stride. And beside him, a woman, graceful, older, elegant. Not flashy, not arm candy. The kind of woman who says nothing at all and still manages to make everyone else in the room feel underdressed. They laughed about something, genuinely, not performatively, and she felt her lungs tighten. A sound she hadn't heard from him in years. Not like that. He didn't see her at first. Or maybe he did and just didn't flinch. But she couldn't stop herself. Her boots clicked against the concrete floor as she crossed the gallery in a straight, unbroken line. Her chest was tight, her mouth dry, her stomach somewhere between rage and grief. Daniel. He turned, slowly. Not startled, not annoyed, just aware, like a man who had already run this simulation in his mind. For a moment, she just stood there. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to slap him and hug him and ask him how the hell he could just disappear and then come back as this. But all that came out was, why? He tilted his head slightly. Why what? His voice was calm, almost too calm. Why this? She said, arms gesturing wide, voice cracking. The envelope. The deed. Ally. All of it. You just destroyed everything. He looked at her the way surgeons must look at their incisions. Precise, unshaken. Because your laugh, he said quietly, told me everything I needed to know. She blinked, stunned. What does that even mean? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped past her. Not brusquely, not cruelly, just done, as if she was the door to a room he no longer lived in. Then he paused. She held her breath. Maybe he was going to say something real, something human. Maybe this was the part in the movie where the old lovers finally. Tell her, he said without turning back. The lease ends next week. And then he walked away. Not slowly, not dramatically, just cleanly. She stood in the gallery, surrounded by people she didn't know, staring after a man she once believed she owned, socially, emotionally, spiritually. But she never owned him. She simply underestimated the weight of his silence. And now, even his exit had consequences. A week later, Ally moved in with her sister. The locks were changed by noon. The building manager handed her a neutral folder and said, "New ownership. Legal process is final." The word final echoed in her head. He was really gone, and he had never looked back, not even once.